Humans were fucking pissed. So angry, they were ready to burn the entire Galactic Empire to the ground. After centuries of oppression and slavery under the reptilian Ithorians, something finally snapped. It started on the hellish mining colony of Kepler-22b. The human laborers there, worked to the bone in lethal conditions for pitiful rations, launched a strike against their overseers. Led by ex-soldier Arthur Burns, they fought back with sabotage and guerrilla tactics. But the Ithorians crushed the uprising ruthlessly. Commander Raxor's troops slaughtered dozens of striking workers. Burns barely escaped the massacre, but as news spread to other human worlds, it ignited the spark of rebellion. Outrage boiled over into unrest on colony after colony. Burns became the face of the resistance, a charismatic leader urging all humans to rise up and cast off their chains. Rebel cells formed in secret, coordinating with him on strikes against critical Imperial targets. The Empire reeled, blindsided by the scale and ferocity of the human insurgency. The labor they depended on was in open revolt. As attacks escalated, Imperial control began crumbling. What started as a local workers' dispute was exploding into a revolution that threatened the foundations of Ithorian rule. Humanity was now locked in a desperate fight for freedom against a vastly superior power. An epic battle loomed, one that would decide the fate of a species and an empire. Pushed past their limits, with no choice left but to resist, mankind was about to show the galaxy what happens when you back humans into a corner. Humanity was mad as hell, and they weren't going to take it anymore. As the rebellion spread like wildfire across human colonies, Arthur Burns emerged as the face of the resistance. He moved in secret between worlds, rallying the downtrodden and oppressed to take up arms against their Ithorian overlords. At his side was Jax Rogan, a grizzled ex-smuggler with a talent for procuring weapons and equipment through less than legal means. Together, they began knitting the disparate rebel cells into a cohesive fighting force. The Empire's response was as swift as it was brutal. A massive fleet commanded by Admiral Zartok descended on the rest of colonies, raining destruction from orbit and disgorging legions of heavily armed troops to crush the insurgency. Cities burned under the onslaught, reduced to rubble and ash. Humans died by the thousands, cut down by energy weapons, or rounded up for mass executions as examples to the rest. But the rebels refused to submit. Under Burns's leadership, they launched guerrilla raids to disrupt Imperial supply lines, destroy weapons stockpiles, and sabotage critical infrastructure. Rebel hackers, led by a computer prodigy named Sasha, infiltrated Ithorian networks to spread disinformation and propaganda, stoking further unrest behind enemy lines. It was in one of these daring cyber incursions that they uncovered plans for a terrifying new warship, the Decimator. Burns turned to Lena Sorensen, a brilliant engineer who had designed mining equipment on Kepler-22b before the uprising. Now her technical skills were put to a new purpose, finding weaknesses in the Decimator's design that the rebels could exploit. As she pored over the stolen schematics, the resistance gained an unexpected ally from within the Empire itself. Ryla Vex, an Ithorian scientist, had grown increasingly sickened by the Empire's atrocities against its human subjects. Unable to stomach the genocide any longer, she fled to the rebels, bringing a wealth of Imperial intel and a fierce commitment to help burn down the corrupt regime she had once served. Her inside knowledge of troop deployments and secret research initiatives quickly proved invaluable to the human cause. Yet even as the rebels struck blow after blow against the Ithorians, the cost in human lives kept climbing. Entire cities had been obliterated, their populations massacred or driven to squalid refugee camps, straining the rebellion's ability to provide food, medical care, and shelter. Burns, ever the leader, threw himself into coordinating relief efforts, even as he planned the next offensive. With Lena's help, that offensive soon took shape, a surprise attack on the orbital shipyard constructing the first batch of Decimator warships. It was a daring gambit, but if successful, it would deal a crippling blow to Imperial military power. As the rebel fleet smashed through the shipyard's defenses, Jax Rogan led a strike team to plant explosives along the Decimator hulls. The ensuing chain reaction tore the vessels apart, but not before a burst of shrapnel eviscerated Jax and sent Burns tumbling, gravely wounded. But the Decimator's destruction sent shockwaves through the Empire. Reeling and humiliated, the Ithorians searched frantically for a killing stroke to end the rebellion once and for all. In his desperation, Admiral Zartok urged the Emperor to unleash a final solution, a genetically engineered virus that would eradicate the human species from the galaxy. Horrified by the idea, Ryla Vex raced to warn the rebels of the looming viral apocalypse. As Burns lay recovering from his wounds, he absorbed the grim news of the Imperial bioweapon. He knew there was only one hope for the survival of the human race, the complete destruction of the Ithorian ability to make war. And that meant striking directly at the heart of Imperial power, the Ithorian homeworld itself. As he called together his inner circle to plan this final, all-or-nothing assault, the full magnitude of the stakes hit home. The battle to come would not just determine the fate of the human rebellion, it would decide whether humanity itself had a future. In this desperate hour, the species' last and only hope lay in the hands of Burns and his tiny army of heroes. It was time for the Empire to learn the true fury of humans, backed into a corner with nothing left to lose. The rebel fleet surged towards Ithoria Prime, a ragtag armada of stolen Imperial vessels and retrofitted civilian ships. In the lead cruiser's command center, Arthur Burns gripped the tactical display, his face etched with stubborn persistence. "All ships prepare for orbital insertion," he ordered. "Remember, we're buying time for the ground team. Every second counts." As the fleet engaged the Ithorian armada, Burns and his strike team boarded a stealth shuttle. The craft plummeted through the atmosphere, weaving between energy blasts and debris. On the planet's surface, Lena Sorensen and her team of hackers huddled in an abandoned communications hub. Their fingers flew over salvaged consoles, probing for weaknesses in the Imperial network. "I'm in," Lena announced, her eyes reflecting scrolling data. "Uploading the bioweapon files now." The shuttle touched down in Ithoria Prime's capital. Burns led his team through winding streets, dodging patrols and snipers. They reached the Imperial Palace, a towering edifice of gleaming metal and stone. "Breach charges set," a rebel whispered. The explosion rocked the building's foundations. As they fought their way inside, Burns's comlink crackled. Lena's voice came through, tense but triumphant. "Broadcast successful. The whole galaxy knows about the bioweapon now." Burns allowed himself a grim smile. One objective down, one to go. They battled floor by floor, leaving a trail of fallen Ithorian guards. On the upper levels, they encountered fiercer resistance. Admiral Zartok himself appeared, flanked by elite troops. "Raxer was a fool," Zartok snarled. "I'll finish what he started on Kepler 22b." The two leaders clashed in furious combat. Burns's rage fueled every strike, memories of Jax and countless other fallen comrades driving him forward. Zartok's scaled hide turned aside glancing blows, but Burns pressed his advantage relentlessly. With a final vicious thrust, Burns' vibroblade found a gap in Zartok's armor. The Admiral fell, his life ebbing away on the polished floor. Battered and bleeding, Burns led the surviving rebels to the throne room. They burst in, weapons trained on the frail figure seated before them. "It's over," Burns declared. "Surrender now, or we'll ensure every world in the galaxy sees your plans for genocide." To his shock, the Emperor raised a trembling hand. "Enough," the ancient Ithorian wheezed. "Too much blood has been spilled. I will discuss terms for peace." As word of the ceasefire spread, celebrations erupted across human worlds, but pockets of resistance remained on both sides. Captain Zartok II rallied hardline Ithorians, vowing to continue the fight. Some human factions, unwilling to forgive centuries of oppression, refused to lay down their arms. In a secret facility deep beneath Ithoria Prime's surface, Colonel Xanthus surveyed his bioweapon stockpile. His scaled fingers caressed a vial of shimmering liquid, a manic gleam in his eyes. "Soon," he hissed, "soon they'll all pay." As Burns and the Emperor's representatives began the delicate work of forging a lasting peace, the shadow of Xanthus's vengeance loomed. The fate of two species hung in the balance, with forces of destruction poised to plunge the galaxy back into the inferno of total war. The fragile peace talks had barely begun when the first reports came in. On the human colony of New Eden, people were dying by the thousands. Within hours, similar news flooded in from other worlds. Millions of human colonists convulsed in agony as their bodies betrayed them, consumed from within by an engineered plague of terrifying potency. Arthur Burns stared at the casualty reports, his face ashen. "How?" he whispered. "We were so close." The Emperor's hologram flickered before him. The ancient Ithorian's features twisted with genuine anguish. "This was not our doing, Burns. We have identified the culprit, a rogue element named Colonel Xanthus. He and his followers have gone against everything we're working towards." Burns' fists clenched. "Your assurances mean little while my people are dying." "Then let us act together," the Emperor said. "I will share all we know of Xanthus's whereabouts. We must stop him before he can unleash more devastation." Within hours, a joint strike force assembled. Human and Ithorian ships, so recently locked in mortal combat, now flew side by side. Their target, a remote asteroid base where intelligence placed Xanthus in his bioweapon facility. As the fleet approached, Burns received a transmission from Lena Sorensen. "We're making progress on a cure," she reported, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. "But we need more time. Whatever you find in that base could be the key." The assault on Xanthus's stronghold was brutal and chaotic. Human and Ithorian soldiers fought side by side through winding corridors, facing fanatical defenders and automated defense systems. Burns led from the front, his weapon cutting down those who stood between him and justice for the millions dead. They found Xanthus in his inner sanctum, surrounded by vials of shimmering liquid. The rogue colonel's eyes blazed with zealotry as he reached for a dead man's switch. "You're too late," he snarled. "This entire facility is rigged. One move and I'll flood it with enough toxins to kill worlds." What followed was a tense standoff. Burns inched closer, trying to reason with the madman, while signaling his team to find a way to neutralize the threat. In the end, it was an Ithorian soldier who made the decisive move, firing a precision shot that severed Xanthus's hand from the switch. The colonel howled in pain and rage, lashing out wildly. In the scuffle, containment vessels shattered. Alarms blared as the air filled with a deadly mist. "Evacuate!" Burns roared, dragging the bound Xanthus with him as soldiers scrambled for the exits. With Xanthus in custody and his operation dismantled, Burns returned to the negotiating table. The joint mission had built a measure of trust, but both sides still faced internal opposition to peace. Admiral Zartok's son, now a rising star in the Imperial military, railed against cooperation with humans. "We cannot show weakness," he thundered to his followers. "The time to crush this rebellion once and for all is now." Meanwhile, human extremists like Colonel Hanzik refused to accept Lena's newly developed cure, seeing it as an Ithorian ploy. "They enslaved us for centuries," Hanzik proclaimed. "Now we're supposed to trust their medicine? Never." The Emperor made a bold move, stripping Zartok loyalists of power and announcing sweeping reforms. Humans would be integrated into the Empire as equals, with Burns himself named governor of a newly autonomous region of human colonies. As Burns stood before a vast crowd of humans and Ithorians, he saw hope in their eyes, but also uncertainty and lingering anger. The road ahead would not be easy. Extremists on both sides still plotted in the shadows, and the scars of centuries would not heal overnight. But for the first time, there was a real chance for lasting peace. Burns stepped up to the podium, ready to address a new era for both their peoples. Burns's words echoed across the vast plaza, his voice carrying to the farthest reaches of the gathered crowd. Humans and Ithorians stood side by side, their faces a mix of hope and trepidation. As he concluded his address, a ripple of applause spread through the throng, but it was quickly drowned out by angry shouts from the fringes. "Traitor!" a human voice bellowed. "You'd have us forget centuries of oppression?" An Ithorian's flanged tones cut through the din. "The Emperor betrays our heritage. Humans cannot be trusted." Burns scanned the crowd, his eyebrows furrowed. He'd known this moment would come, but the reality of it still stung. As he stepped down from the podium, Ryla Vex approached, her eyes reflecting his own weariness. "It's begun," she said softly. "The extremists are already moving." Before Burns could respond, his comlink chirped. Lena Sorensen's face appeared, her expression grim. "Arthur, we have a situation. Colonel Hanzik's forces have just hit 3 Joint Authority outposts. They're calling for all humans to reject the Accords." Burns cursed under his breath. "Casualties?" "Unknown, but—" Lena's image flickered, her words drowned in static. The connection went dead. "Lena! Lena!" Burns tapped the comlink furiously, but the screen remained dark. Ryla's hand on his arm steadied him. "We need to move. Now." They hurried through the corridors of the government complex, aides and security personnel falling in around them. Burns's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of intelligence they'd gathered on Hanzik's splinter group. "Have we pinpointed their base of operations?" he asked. Ryla shook her head. "Not yet, but we've tracked some of their communications to the outer colonies. It's possible." An explosion rocked the building, sending them staggering. Alarms blared as smoke filled the air. Through the haze, Burns saw figures in combat gear advancing, weapons raised. "Get down!" he shouted, dragging Ryla behind a fallen column. Energy bolts sizzled overhead as security forces returned fire. In the chaos, Burns's comlink crackled to life. A familiar voice, twisted with hatred, came through. "This is only the beginning, Burns. We won't rest until every Ithorian is driven from our worlds. You can't stop us." "Hanzik," Burns growled, "listen to me. This isn't the way. We have a chance for real peace." "Peace?" Hanzik spat. "There can be no peace with our oppressors. And now we have the means to ensure our survival. Your precious scientist is ours." The connection cut off, leaving Burns with a pit in his stomach. Lena, captured, her research on the bioweapon in the hands of fanatics. As security forces beat back the attack, Burns and Ryla regrouped in a secure command center. Reports flooded in from across human space. Coordinated strikes against Joint Authority targets, riots on colony worlds, ships hijacked by Hanzik loyalists. "It's not just Hanzik," Ryla said, her eyes fixed on a tactical display. "Look." Burns watched as entire sectors of Ithorian space went dark, communication relays falling silent. A message flashed across the screen, broadcast on all Imperial frequencies. "The true Empire lives. Death to the usurpers and their human dogs, for the glory of Ithoria." "Zartok's son," Burns breathed. "He's made his move." The galaxy was erupting into chaos around them. Everything they'd fought for, all the progress they'd made, threatened to unravel in an instant. Burns felt the weight of countless lives on his shoulders as he turned to face his team. "Get me the Emperor," he said. "We need to contain this before it's too late."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.